Today I find myself behind the wheel of the MG GS, MG's third car in their recent history and their first ever SUV. Now MG historically has made two-seater convertible, rear-wheel drive sports cars, they've made a few warm hatchbacks and even a V8 saloon car. But now it's a very different company, their business has had to change and so they've got to build things like SUVs. So while when you turn the car on it proudly flashes up on the screen saying since 1924, in reality, yeah, it's a very different company. The cars, they're designed and engineered in the UK, but actually they're built in China. Now SUVs, as we all know, they're money makers. There's a reason why so many car companies are building SUVs. And MG, if they're focusing on the mainstream, they had to build an SUV, and they had to build it quickly, which is why you've got the GS. Now like the MG3, MG's hatchback, you've only got one choice of engine in the GS. Thankfully it's a different engine. In the 3 you get a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated, it's got 105 brake horsepower. In the GS it's still a 1.5 litre but it's turbocharged, so it's got 164 brake horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque. But that is the only engine choice, you can't get any other engine at all, no petrols, no diesels, nothing, that's it, you've only got one. Peak power is at 5,600 RPM and the red line is 7,000 RPM, but you don't want to be revving out to 7,000 RPM, it's going to be pretty pointless. Peak torque is between 1,600 RPM and 4,300 RPM. 0 to 60 takes 9.6 seconds and the top speed is 118 miles an hour and you should get about 46 miles to the gallon. But the engine itself is not particularly inspiring, doesn't sound very nice and it's just, yeah, it's not riveting. Now I'm driving a top of the range exclusive model and I've got a 6-speed manual gearbox, which is actually okay. It's a little bit loose and the pedals are a little bit soft, but it's alright. But you can also get on the top of the range model a 7-speed double clutch gearbox. However, as fun as that might sound, performance is exactly the same and the economy drops off, well, it's marginal, but it does drop off by about 1 mile to the gallon. So stick with the manual. Now the steering feels a little elasticy, just off centre, you don't really know what it's going to do. When you get a bit more angle on, it's better. The only trouble is these seats aren't massively supportive, so when you do put more lock on, there's a decent amount of grip, so it does hold on, so you find yourself kind of gripping onto the wheel to stay in your seat as opposed to just controlling the car nicely. Rides pretty comfortably, it's relatively smooth, although it gets a bit flustered at high speed, and actually in terms of comfort, what's probably most annoying at high speed is wind noise. There's quite a lot of it around the wing mirrors and up above the windscreen. There's also quite a lot of roll. It's not out of control, but it does like to lean. Now I can't drive a GS without mentioning probably what is going to be its biggest selling point, let's be honest, and that is price, because this car is the size of a Nissan Qashqai, roughly, and yet it's about £3.5 grand cheaper, £3,500, £15,095 for an entry-level car. And that brings me on to the interior. I was a little bit worried, to be honest, before I got this car. I thought the interior would be similar to that of the MG3 I drove a few months ago, and that wasn't a bad car, but it felt like it was already a few years old. And on first impressions, you get in this car, granted this is top spec, but it is a marked improvement. It is not an exciting design, but you've got leather seats, you've got sat-nav, you've got everything you need. It definitely feels like a step in the right direction. As for the way it looks on the outside, well, it's not an MG BGT or an MG Midget or anything like that, but I actually quite like it. Do you know what though? It's a totally acceptable SUV. There are other cars in this class that are less inspiring to drive, and there are plenty of other cars that are more expensive, so financially, yeah, it's got a strong case for itself. The biggest drawback, I suppose, is the choice of engines, and I think until there's a broader range, this car is going to struggle perhaps more than it would do otherwise. This car is promising though, and I really want MG to succeed.